Hello and welcome everyone to the 46th episode of the Summoning Hour podcast. Today joining me is my guest from Leeds Beckett Esports Society out in Leeds. And today I have former president Alex and the Overwatch
Hello,
team captain Andrew. Say hi, guys.
Hello, I'm
hello,
the Overwatch team captain Andrew.
and I'm the former president, Alex.
So it's interesting, I want to jump right into this, is that both times I've interviewed someone out from the UK or Europe, I've had the former president on because of the way it sounds like your clubs are run and handed off into that next group who's going to be leading the society. So for anyone who didn't listen to my last podcast from Glasgow University, I'm curious if you can kind of elaborate on why the former president is still involved at this point.
Um, well, at the moment, it was more when I was the president, I kind of ran the society by myself for the most part. I had a few people that kind of took over for the actual esports teams, like I had a captain for each, to delegate it a bit. And well, when you're picking new presidents and so on, you have to do a voting system, and there's only one guy who got, well, Andrew and the other guy got chosen. And it just seems like a lot of the time the former presidents, in some cases, are because they're less busy when they're not the president, they have more time to talk about the actual society because they're still involved afterwards.
And Alex is involved in the fact that he's in the Overwatch team as well, so he's still quite like actually involved with helping out in certain aspects of the society, but not running it as much.
Yeah, I'm more just also sometimes the current president will. I don't know if this is the case for all the other societies, but at least I've occasionally been having the current president approaching me for advice and so on running the society throughout the year. So you tend to still be fairly in the loop with the society afterwards as well, which then means you sometimes fill the role and are also a bit more informed.
Okay, that's great. Let me do one last thing for the podcast real quick, and you're going to get a little chime and a little robo voice going. I would just want to make sure I get this recorded. Uh,
Now recording.
we're fancy here on the summoning hour.
That
Okay.
was pretty strange.
So this is now. I want to go back into your both of your personal joining of the esports society and what led you there, and just why esports in general for each one of you, and how you got involved with the society.
I guess
Um,
Alex should go first because he joined before me.
yeah, well, basically, when I came to university, I was quite a big fan of Pokemon Go at the time. So I've been looking at what societies to get involved with because obviously coming to new university, I wouldn't know anyone. So I decided to look at joining a society. There there was like a game society I knew of, so I was going to join that, and then I found out it was inactive, well, semi-inactive, in that no one, people who were running it weren't doing anything with it. So I decided to get it going instead, and yeah, so I ended up just falling out of interest with Pokemon Go very shortly after starting uni, and ended up just using it as a way of trying to get people involved and still people from the uni.
And I guess my introduction to the society was at a freshers fair, which is like at the start of the year. All the societies have like a little stall, and they try and market the society to all the new students. And I saw there was a gaming society, and I'm quite a competitive person, so I inquired to see if they had any teams. They had a CS:GO team, a League of Legends team, but they didn't have an Overwatch team. So I joined and set up the Overwatch team to try and get other people into esports. So yeah, I think that's my introduction side.
I believe I was actually. What was I the one that got you? That was there hosting the stall at the
Yeah,
time.
I was. Yeah, you were hosting the
Okay.
store when I walked up.
Yeah, I have actually no memory of meeting you initially. I just remember
thanks.
somehow knowing you. So yeah. Hey, I had like over 100 or something people come up to me that day, and like
Yeah,
80
no,
of them signed
that's
up. So
understandable. That's understandable.
yeah.
So you guys both got involved, and you just kind of took things by your interests, and you took hold of that. I mean, with Overwatch, and just hey, here's a gaming club. I'm going to join this. What was it that made you want to step up and kind of take the lead on either creating the Overwatch League or the Overwatch team, or just wanting to climb that kind of hierarchical ladder within the club?
Well, I don't tend to shy away from leadership, so because it seems to be that a lot of people would want to play in a team but don't want to actually take the responsibility of leading it. So I thought I'd put my foot forward and get into that position and get the team set up and running.
Yeah, and I kind of just chose it because the three roles that you can pick up with when you're running a society is the president, who's the one that communicates with the student union, and so on, sort of like the admin for everything. Then you've got the secretary and the treasurer, and because I came up with because I was the one who was looking for a secretary and treasurer, I naturally became the president because I was the one who started it. So it was more of a I just found two people to fill the roles and then made it a thing. Yeah, I was pretty much just wanting to be involved in something.
Yeah, I think it's the fact that we just wanted to be involved, and the fact that the the pre-existing structure wasn't there already, so someone just had to put the structure in, and then other people started filling in as well.
Also, a lot of people like playing games, so it's pretty easy to just get people interested in playing, or at least joining up.
What was that like when you started seeing the interest of people joining into wanting to play casually and then competitively? What was that like seeing the response?
I don't actually remember how it transitioned into just a very casual thing because, for the most part, we just had like a Discord server, I believe, which people just chatted with occasionally, shared memes in, and that was about
Yeah.
it for a long time. And then I think it was actually second year when I think it was second year at least when I was approached by Andrew and the current president about the NSC and NUEL, and they were interested in partaking in it. I'd never heard of it, and I had some previous experience playing in a similar environment, but for a game called Smite. So I was down to get involved in that again because I really enjoyed playing in the team.
It's always a great feeling when you get a full team set up as well, and you start like scrimming and practicing and just get that team experience going.
It's definitely one of those things that starts building that further layer of community within your everyone loves gaming community. But as soon as you start having those people that you rely on, depend on, and you're practicing that with that same goal of getting better, it definitely builds up those relationships and just how closely that you want to be able to execute with them.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So you mentioned Smite. Is that still one of the teams that you all run?
Oh no, it wasn't. It was a thing that I played before
Gotcha.
university. I haven't played it since I haven't played it in quite a while now.
So, so you have an Overwatch team that competes. What other competitive teams do you all run out of Leeds Beckett?
So at Leeds Beckett, we have the CS:GO and the League of Legends teams, which I obviously don't really hear much about. Bearing in mind, I'm really only invested in the Overwatch team now. From what I'm aware, CS:GO team isn't running currently.
Yeah, as well, especially this time of year, a lot of the teams tend to fall off from performing because of like finishing dissertations and exams and stuff like that, which is a shame, but just tends to be what happens.
I mean, it's the reality of why you're going to university in the first place. Education first, then clubs and competition.
Yeah.
Yeah,
At-
Andrew, what he said.
So at least the students are maintaining the real purpose why they're there. But some clubs I've interviewed, they actually go so far as to being like, okay, there are limited practice hours, and we want to make sure that this keeps going and building up and making sure that there's a sense of continuity from team to team, even roster to roster. Now, my understanding of the society system is like you have to hand everything off at one point or another to that next in line to run the club once the current president either doesn't want to do it anymore or they graduate. How is it that you're maintaining the continuity of the club without that continuity of the teams?
Um, it's kind of all self-contained, so it's up to each team on how they decide like how to go forward. So I currently already know who is going to be the who I would like to run the team going forward. Because he also has quite a competitive nature like me and wants to see the university do well in the Overwatch League scene. Oh, not Overwatch, in the Overwatch scene. Um, in both competitive tournaments. And then I'm not sure how the league and the CS:GO teams are going to do it, but um, I guess at the higher level, Alex, about the presidential side of it.
Well, basically, it's just I just got told by the student union at around March time. Yeah, have to you have to have a voting system for people to actually elect you in. Next, at the time, I was planning on doing some sort of placement year, so I just didn't put myself forwards. And there was one guy, fortunately enough, who was interested to, well, he was kind of active already, who pretty much was one of the only people who put himself forward, along with Andrew. And yeah, then you just have to have an open election sort of thing, where people just vote on who they prefer.
Okay, but it still uses people who are in the club, and I mean, it makes sure that there is someone who wants to keep things going. Now, it sounded like since you had a limited pool, it was easy to pick the one person who had hopes of doing that, and it really sounds like it's driven by student interest on keeping even the society going. So I imagine that's a little risky for uh, you, Alex, if you only have like one or two options and you're like, I don't know if these will really represent Leeds Beckett in the best light.
Yeah, that's it. To be honest, there was a little bit of a case with that um, with the elections that I had to run. So I was actually the president for 2 years during my first and second year, and that was because during my first year I was taking it up from when the society was initially kind of inactive because of the amount of time it took to set up the society initially. That's why I didn't have to do an election to the second year. But yeah, it's kind of a bit annoying because I found not many people actually want to take on the responsibilities
Yeah,
of
people want to
being
be a
involved.
part of the society, but not have to run it.
Yeah, it's a lot easier to just sit on the sidelines and either get involved or not get involved, and then just talk about it, as opposed to doing things.
Yeah, that's kind of how these early communities have sounded when I even over here at some of the smaller universities I've interviewed is like they struggle with getting that initial wave of interest and getting people really bought into supporting the club. And I mean, that seems kind of normal for some of the smaller universities. Would you classify yourselves as one of the smaller universities with an esports society?
I wouldn't
Yeah,
classify the university as a small, but I'd classify the society as a smaller esports society.
yeah, I'd agree with that completely. I mean, actually, I don't know what you would define as a big university. I don't really know how you would judge the size of a university.
Uh,
I mean,
a lot of students actually compare like the number of students who go there. So like the University of Washington, I heard a statistic that they have 50,000 students.
I've actually never looked at a statistic for how many people are at Leeds Beckett, so I have no clue on whether it's big. But yeah, it seems like Leeds Beckett's a relatively small one compared to the majority of the ones. It's not a massively well-known one at least.
Now, is this kind of culture of maybe a slow adoption of competitive esports and gaming culture kind of small in the area, even surrounding Leeds, or is Leeds Beckett kind of following other esport society leaders in the area in terms of how to grow and how to really join into that competitive scene?
I'd say it's definitely more of a follower from what I experienced since of the three universities in Leeds. You've got University of Leeds, and then Leeds Beckett, and then you've got Leeds Trinity. Um, University of Leeds is obviously pretty big. A lot of people at least have heard of it in the UK,
Yeah,
or
it's
are aware of it,
yeah.
and they're pretty big for the esports scene as well, from what I'm aware of.
Yeah, they've got multiple teams for multiple games, so they've got a lot of players.
Yeah, versus Leeds Beckett, which has got very little.
Well, you do with what you got, and
Yeah,
and it's always just the beginning. It's very early. I mean, at least in the States, it's very early for this esports club and varsity team construction. Like the first varsity teams getting scholarships. It started about 3 years ago, and there's still maybe a baker's dozen of how many actually have varsity programs now. And it's just really small, but it's picking up a lot of steam. Is there much of a plan for growing uh, Leeds Beckett Esports Society, even from the university support side?
Um, well, when I was the president, I in my first year tried setting up a room dedicated to the society where we would have the we would have equipment that would be able to run all of the esports that teams would require. So 6 computers with good specs that could run any of the CS:GO League and Overwatch fairly well. Um, the room was under construction up until Easter of my first year, and afterwards it kind of became, well, the same as it is now. It kind of just stopped. And whenever I've spoken about it, it seems the university's not interested in pushing it any further.
Mm.
But that's because the university at the moment is still primarily a sports university, which is why a lot of adoption seems to be kind of behind for them because they're locked into the physical sports perspective of esports as opposed to any kind of sport.
That that doesn't sound too surprising. I've had a lot of I've heard of a lot of conflict between the student body, what the student bodies want, and what the faculty want. One of the biggest schools that I've interviewed, Arizona State University, they've been basically shut out from any way of progressing, despite having over 1,000 people in their Discord actively playing games, actively engaging with online meetings or in-person meetings, and it's a huge club, and their Heroes of the Storm team actually ended up winning our collegiate Heroes of the Dorm League a couple years ago, and the school basically said, "Yeah, look at us, we won an esport. Don't talk about it."
That's a shame. That is a real shame.
Yeah, that's so much. Honestly, I thought that we were having a pretty bad time with the fact the university didn't want to build any, help at all. But that's really sad, actually.
Yeah, and there's a sense of there's going to be some comeuppance for people who aren't paying attention for this, because a lot of people in the States are paying attention to it now. The conversation wasn't even started, let's see, 8 months ago when I started covering collegiate esports. Like, no one was really talking about it. Now, ESPN has a 5 game collegiate tournament going on this spring, early summer, and now everyone's talking about it. The NYXL Overwatch League team is now putting on a New York State local college competition to create a 16 team tournament. No one was talking collegiate 8 months ago, and now people are. So I imagine you're going to find one faculty member who you can latch on to, or it could even be your IT manager, just being like, yes, we should be doing this. And it's mindset that's going to have to change quickly. Otherwise, you're going to be losing a huge recruiting tool for a university. And there's proper motivation for both student and faculty to be getting involved with this.
Yeah, I completely agree. Um,
Yeah.
I think as well in the UK, esports is definitely growing because the the most recent tournament that was launched was the National Student Esports Tournament, or the NSE. And the big thing about that was that they partnered with the British University and Colleges Sport body. So they got official support from Bucks, the British University and College Sports, which is a really big step for esports in the UK. And yeah, like even my parents, they read in the paper about the NSE, so they were pretty happy when they found out I was running a team in the tournament.
Yeah, I mean, that right there, that is a shift. Like, the fact that it was covered in media, the fact that a major governing body recognizes it and is starting to involve itself more, and then the fact that your parents were even receptive to this being a thing, as opposed to being like, these kids playing video games and getting paid for it. Like, that kind of stuff, that kind of
Yeah,
mentality is really what blocks things. But the fact that you have those three things going for you, it's a matter of months before Leeds Beckett kind of goes, oh, I guess we should do this. And then they'll reach out to everyone else and be like, how are you doing this? And they'll realize just how far behind they are and how big of a step it is to get all the way caught up, but at the same time, how easy it is to get started.
yeah. I've
Mm.
um I've tried to run. I don't know about the other teams, but I tried to run the Overwatch team because I've previously captained a rugby team, so I tried to carry over like the mentality of practicing and reviewing past performances and stuff like that. So I tried to instill onto the players of the Overwatch team like how to improve as a player and not just play the game casually as well. So I'm hoping that that'll keep like propagating through all the different I guess generations of the team.
And that's actually really awesome. I like having that foundation of here's basic behaviors to practice to emulate getting better, things to study, things to show that there's more than just sitting down and playing games as people acknowledge it now, because there's so much more that goes into it. And the more you have those things to model off of and show what people are doing to prepare, to teach themselves, to progress, like that's a really important first step. But I think that next step is involving more than just the people who want to play the games and more of the people who want to kind of produce the club and produce the content behind it. And I was browsing the website for Leeds Beckett, and there's a motion capture suite. You have what looks like recording booths and tons of audio equipment and creative suites. I'm just like, you could be tying this education into your esports program, or promoting people who are in those programs to participate and create content. And that's how you start creating that wave of, hey, we should really be doing this thing. So it's frustrating to hear that the school is like, we'll pause the construction, we'll figure it out later kind of mentality, or we'll kind of pay attention to it when everyone else is forcing us to.
Yeah, it's kind of, well, at least I do game design as the course as a course at university. So my lecturers are quite involved with trying to get things running. All the presents I'm aware of, at least, have always been game design students. So if Andrew had been elected, he probably would have been the first non-game design student as president, which would have been interesting. Um, but yeah, so they try to do so, but a lot of the time, students, bearing in mind, most of the students that do hear or get involved with the society are normally game design students. They are already in their own course involved with games and playing together and so on. Um,
That
in
makes a
fact,
lot of sense.
yeah, which then kind of separates and pushes away anyone who's not part of the game design course and wants to be involved in the society. I found.
That's a really interesting problem to solve for. I hadn't heard of a game design program actually kind of getting in the way of people feeling included or welcome. That's an interesting problem to solve.
This was primarily because just last week the society ran a small social, um, which was initially given to the president as an idea by one of the game design lecturers to try and get the society moving a bit more. But it was primarily for the game design course. And the problem I had when I noticed people there was that most of the people who showed up were from game design. Even some of the lecturers showed up to chat and have a quick drink. Um, but then there were some people who seemed to be involved in the society and not in the course that just kind of sat there quietly and didn't really have much input when everyone was talking about the modules that everyone there had experience with and so on or were doing.
Oh, that kind of hurts. Uh, to see
Yeah,
that that opportunity was there and that the solution is I mean it's just right there in your face of make it more welcoming, make it less about the program and more about people who enjoy games and wow. Okay. That's that's even more frustrating. I mean, you have the faculty wanting to push on esports and push to create some notable events and ways to get people involved, and yet you have this hurdle of if you're not in the program, you may not be welcome. Oh, that hurts.
I think as well, because I've just realized that me not being in the games design course might have led to, because we've got quite a good mix of like courses on the Overwatch team. Because we got two film students, an English student, and me, a computing student, and then two games design students.
yeah.
So maybe my my not being in the game design course, it kind of opened up other people up to being on the society teams.
Mm,
Absolutely.
I also believe the fact that you aren't on the game design course is actually the reason, well, the primary reason as to why you weren't elected. Because up until the last few days before the election, you were actually pretty much neck and neck with the current president.
Yeah, I
And
remember.
it was the fact that almost everyone who voted, yeah, most of the people who did vote were from the game design course, and they will vote for the people they know, being the one from the course.
Yeah.
Oh man,
especially
it's
since, yeah, the especially since when you do the course, you tend to share. The high years seem to share rooms with the lower years in some cases, so there's a bit of an overlap.
we're opening a whole can of worms here. Well, I'm glad I can be a part of finding the problem so you all can find a solution and get things rolling. Given where the
That's
club
that.
is at.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say that's the ultimate goal, isn't it? To get it rolling and
Yeah,
to get other people involved and thinking about how to better the society for the future, I guess.
Yeah, it's like trying to roll a boulder up a hill. But then the thing is, at the end of every year, whenever you get a new person in, you basically slide the society back by about 3 months because of the fact the new people getting in have to kind of get up to speed with how running a society actually works.
Yeah, getting up to speed and that loss of tribal knowledge as someone moves out. I mean, they're lucky to have you, Alex, as a resource who's been in that position, who's been able to say, this is how we've done it previously. But as soon as you're out of touch, who's that person who's following up behind you? Are they really going to be available to really drive things or even advise things? And it gets harder and harder as time goes on, but at least your esports society has you as a resource, and Andrew, who's been around for a while, and he's rising in those ranks and wanting to be involved. But you have kind of double the challenge of finding people who want to lead and want to be involved, but then also time is against you.
Yeah, it's also quite frustrating because obviously gamers, well, they like to stay at home and play games, and not all gamers like to play with other gamers. There's a lot of people single player games because there's a lot of them and they're generally quite fun, which then gives very little incentive for gamers to then actually, in some cases, go out and potentially meet other gamers.
And I was just gonna add, I think a space that could be put into the university would really like help people get over that hurdle of not being as sociable, where teams could meet up and practice together and build like connections rather than just be talking to each other over Discord or through the game and stuff like that.
I mean,
Almost like what the room I tried to make.
Yeah, I know.
It was
and
bad, man.
And Andrew, you know more than anyone, like how important it is to be in that same room as opposed to over voice, considering how well or the difference between a LAN performance and an online performance is with a competitive game.
Yeah. And I've tried to emulate being in the same room by sometimes live streaming VOD reviews and going through and having like live question and answers sessions. But again, there's nothing like actually being in the same room and chatting to each other while also like playing the game. So it's just
Right.
a bit heartbreaking.
Well, it sounds like the path in front of you all is pretty clear in terms of how you want to grow the esports club. Get the dedicated room, get the non-game design track students involved, find a way to make those events more welcoming, and you've got faculty on your side. So that's a great start. That's a resource that a lot of universities don't have, and it's one of those things that just really puts a turnkey into the university as a whole, and it opens up a whole lot more resources eventually, especially when the higher ups kind of start saying, okay, you can do this little thing, and then they see the results.
Well, we actually did something a bit like that last year, I believe it was. I think it was around this time last year, where we, as a university, had access to this big monitor in the centre of Leeds, in Leeds town square, where um, we ended up organising a live stream at a esports bar in Leeds, which since unfortunately is closed down. And
Yeah.
that was actually primarily set up most of the way by the faculty at the time. It was very popular. A lot of people watched. In fact, some people still occasionally mention it to me when they're talking about society. Um, yeah, even people who aren't actually invested in the society even watched, which was quite interesting.
It was also just such a great resource to be able to have a space that that was there for us to go and play in and build build the society up from. But as you said, has recently closed down.
Also, to be fair, it was very out of the way place,
Yeah.
so not that many people wanted to come out. Yeah, it was really awkward of a place to get to. It was like a good long walk away from all the university places. It had kind of strange public transport access. It's still quite a walk.
Oh, I hear about esports bars and like places who are actually trying to dedicate themselves to that, and we've had the same success out here. We've had a couple of esports groups or venues to try and host things. Like they pop up and then they go away. It was kind of like a GoFundMe effort to start an esports bar out here, and they requested something like $50,000 as a start, as a seed investment. And I think after the month of duration that they had raised $180. And
Oh
so
wow.
yeah, so they had like nothing, and this was back in 2010, 2009, so way ahead of even like League of Legends rise to power in esports. But it was sad to see that basically no one had that interest or way of supporting it. But if you had that stream and then you had a bar set up and it's somewhat near a college town, it's like, oh, another opportunity that was right there that has that kind of external force and public acceptance of it, of esports as a topic and as a recreation form. And it hurts to hear that these communities pop up and then they go down again. And it sounds like you all are on the cusp of making a change and really start popping off with growth, but it's just out of reach right now.
Yeah,
So
I reckon. Well, if they're in a nice, accessible place, generally, I would say if, for example, where game design course and the society tends to be involved is in a place called Headingley in Leeds. If it was actually there instead where the bar was, I reckon it could have easily gotten enough funding due to the density of people going, willing to travel that distance to go there, would have easily been enough to keep it going.
looks
So
like
I think it's all about placement.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, that makes a big deal. I'm trying to remember where the original purpose for the one in Seattle was supposed to be, but it wasn't in a very nice part of town, and it wasn't in a good location either. So even though the idea of an esports bar was ahead of its time, the location served no one really.
Hmm. And if you've got something nice in a kind of in a place that no one wants to go to, then people probably aren't going to go there.
Yeah, exactly. And so, what's the short-term goals? We've talked about the hurdles in your society's way, but what about what can you be doing now, and what are you working towards as you come up towards the summer and going into the fall when you get that new wave of students?
Well, I'm actually graduating, so I won't actually be involved beyond fall. I guess I'll still be in the society Discord, in touch with the society. I'll probably just be lurking in there, being able to offer any help if people ask. But for the most part, I'll be popping off.
Yeah, I'm looking to transfer into more of a coaching role for the Overwatch team. So, because unless you're a student, you can't participate in the leagues, obviously. So, I'm hoping I can still offer my passion towards the team as more of a coaching role, and hopefully get the team into like the top 15 maybe, because we were close last time, but yeah.
Yeah, where did we end up last time? Can't
We
remember the
finished
number.
25th in the Null,
Oh
and
yeah,
then you were
that's
Yale.
pretty cool.
And that's just a slight adjustment, and then you're in that top 16.
Yeah, honestly, it probably was
And
only a few
hopefully,
matches away.
if we get into like the top bracket, the university will start noticing, and then it will lead to more people wanting to play and lead to better players, and all kind of like domino effect it forward.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, even as you understand more of your club's goals, whether it's especially if you can start incorporating that educational side into it as well, those non-game design tracks and programs, you start getting more interest from people who might want to attend your college because you have the program and esports and they're tied together. I know Oklahoma University, they've started getting letters from juniors and sophomores in high school saying, hey, what are you going to be doing with your esports club? I would really like to go and attend, even though they just rebranded, they just started doing more social outreach to local communities, and their focus isn't even on competition at this point. That's like their third goal down the line. And I feel like if you can start getting that awareness of the program, you're going to start seeing a lot more. It's just going to explode, and it's just going to be right there in your face, and it'll be obvious that the school really won't have much of a choice but to get involved.
Yeah, I think that'll be down to just whoever gets chosen for next year, or whoever is actually present at the time. If the society is even active, I know that there's potentially some problems with the society for next year, and that there hasn't been anyone particularly standing out as participant in the society, from what I'm aware. At least from what I've been told by the current president.
So if the society folds, what does that mean for the gaming culture on Leeds, Beckett?
Um,
Well,
when the
I
society,
know for a fact that the people in the Overwatch team that will be here next year want to compete in the tournaments. So maybe the society would be reborn as a competing only side of it, like society. But that's all I know from my perspective as on the Overwatch team, is that there are definitely people who want to compete as a team.
I guess then they might be the ones stepping up to lead the whole darn thing.
Yeah, that's what it might come down to.
yeah, hey, it won't. Maybe it won't be a game design student again.
Yeah,
Man, maybe that's what it needs. But I mean, you all will find out, and who knows? Maybe your main tank will be your secretary, and your off support will be your treasurer and social media manager. Start balancing roles like you do in Overwatch. That'd be kind of funny.
Yeah, actually, that's another thing that I found when I was running the society. People are very happy to back out of their roles in actually running a society. Was for example, when I started the society, like I mentioned earlier, I needed to have a treasurer and a secretary, which I think I had about four people go through either of those roles, and whenever I approached them with their first initial task of, like, maybe I needed the treasurer to get some money transferred from the society account to the bar, for example, to run the event that I organised, and so on. As soon as I asked them, they kind of backed out.
Yeah,
So hopefully, actually getting someone involved who would stick to what they do.
yep, that's definitely a problem. A lot of people don't understand the amount of work that really comes in with a leadership role. And each one of those roles, whether it's secretary, vice president, treasurer, social media manager, any other roles that are kind of required to keep things going, there's a lot of work that goes into each one of those things. It's kind of specialized, but you have a role to do of responsibilities that you can do individually, but each one of those roles fits in with another member, and you have to be willing to communicate, work with those other people, and take the time to do it and do it right, especially if you have any goals going forward, as opposed to I'm just kind of doing this thing just because. And finding the
Yeah,
right
I
and
wonder. Sorry, you go.
I was gonna say, and you never know. I mean, you're essentially hiring people for a job, and they might sell you on them in the interview, but they can change their mind and their behaviors on a dime, and you just don't even know when they're going to do that, and especially with students where they have the likely excuse and the right priority of saying I got to focus on school, and totally you got to do that, but there's also a lot of that apathy of I don't feel like doing it anymore. I'm just not passionate about it anymore. Or this is more work than I thought, and all that kind of stuff is going to trip people up.
Yeah, it's no, I'd agree with that. Yeah.
You were going to say something else.
No, that was actually pretty much the end of it. Really, what I was going to say. Really.
Oh, perfect. Great minds, right?
Yeah.
So I want to give you all a chance to do shout outs either for your teammates or for the new president and Leeds Beckett faculty. Talk about what you have going on, if there's any upcoming events, or when you can start expecting some more news from the society.
Andrew, do you want to go first? Says anything?
Yeah, okay. I'll just shout out the Overwatch team. I was very happy with our performance, and hopefully you guys can carry yourselves to victory next year.
Good about no skill. Yeah, I want to shout out to primarily the course leaders for game design, because that actually did help an awful lot, to be fair with me, when I was the president. And good luck to the current president and whoever is also next year's, whoever that may be.
Is there any social media channels that people can follow along at?
Yes, there's the Leeds Beckett Games Design, not Games Design, Gaming Society Twitter. I'll just get that up now.
Is that even used?
Yeah. If I could the link.
Looks like it is LBU Games Society on Twitter.
That's it.
Oh yeah, that's it. Yeah, I've never actually looked at the Twitter for it. I didn't even realize it was active. I think I made it a while back and I never actually logged into it again. That was about it. Yeah, the most active place is the Facebook page, Leeds Beckett Games Society. I've got it open right now.
Or the Discord as well, the Leeds Beckett Games Society Discord, which you can access through the face page.
Yeah, there's a link for that in the description of it at the bottom.
Perfect. And Andrew, if people wanted to follow the Overwatch team's progression through your leagues and the organized competition out there, where would they do that?
You can find the standings on the nse.gg website and the NUEL website. There isn't currently a Twitter or anything set up for the individual team.
Perfect. Well, thank you guys for being my interview guests. You've projected another university that I'm really interested in hearing how the esports scene grows there, as well as just kind of as a part of the overall wave of colleges I believe will be adopting esports in a more primary competition, sports related avenue. So I look forward to hearing about your growth, and I hope that everything works out well, that with the faculty, with the involvement in the community, it's the way to go, and I'm really looking forward to hearing about your growth over the next year.
All right, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
And
anytime,
anytime,
I might actually
yeah,
around and look at the other not VODs, what's it? I have a watch of some of the other podcasts in the future.
there you go. And anytime you have an event coming up, or if you've made movement in terms of getting more university support, feel free to let me know, and we'll do a quick recording, or you can send me an audio file of what's going on, and I'm happy to boost the signal.
Sounds good.
All right, thanks guys.
Thank you. Um,
And that's it for the stream. This will go out not this Monday, but next Monday. And I will see you all later. Ta.